What's going on, my fellow photographers? G Taylor here with another Tailored Eye video, and in this one we're going to jump on one of the biggest topics that took me a long time to get through when I was getting started. Actually getting started. Let's jump into it. We have a lot to cover in this video here today, so make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so that way once you're ready to get started, you can come on back and hang out with me. In my last video, I took the time out to describe my journey and how I got started into photography and to get where I am here today. And I'm sure your story is way different from mine, but we're actually working towards the same goal, and that's becoming a great photographer. One of the big things for me was just finding out where exactly to start. In this video, I'm gonna help point you in the right direction. We're gonna cover three main topics here in this video. One, how to pick a camera. Two, things you'll need for said camera. And three, kind of going through a bit of the basics for the extras you can get for your camera too. Now with that all being said, let's jump straight into the deep end. Let's get that camera picked out. Now I'm sure you're sitting here watching this video, you've probably got lost in the forest of choices when it comes to picking a camera. Full frame or crop sensor, mirrored or mirrorless camera, and of course Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fuji. You got tons of options there. And what's up with all these different features on each one? So with all those choices being out there, I'm gonna start with the main one that probably is the biggest decision. Full frame or crop sensors. When making this decision, there's one big question you wanna ask yourself right off the bat. What do I actually wanna shoot? A lot of your photography will be based on just exactly that. The subject of what you're going to capture with your camera. As you probably already saw, DSLRs comes in two main flavors. Of course, your full frame sensors, and then you have your crop sensor. Either one you grab, you're going to be able to capture some great photos, regardless of sensor size. With that being said, there are some key differences between a full frame sensor and a crop sensor. Now to explain said differences, gotta take a little trip back and do some little history here. Back in the old film camera days, the film you shot on was always the same size no matter what camera you had, 35 millimeters. That was a standard then, and is pretty much still the standard now. When it comes down to it, the 35 millimeter sensor is gonna take full advantage in being able to capture every single detail on every millimeter of that sensor. Your full frame camera is gonna be great for taking photos of wide landscapes, really big buildings for architecture, and of course, give you that great bokeh effect. Long story short, 35 millimeter full frame camera is going to give you much more light, much more detail, since you got much more room to capture an image on that sensor. Now with the full frame sensor, sounds like it's all good. Might as well go that route, right? Not exactly. There's actually two big drawbacks for going to a full frame camera. The first one, of course, is that being full frame, they're a lot bigger than your usual camera. But the second bigger drawback is that they are highly expensive when it comes down to it. Now, if you're here watching this video with me, you're probably just starting out looking to get things started. Grabbing a full frame camera right now, unless you can afford it, is just like going down to Ferrari and grabbing a new car only when you need something to get back and forth from like grocery store or to and from school. Sure, it looks nice, you look the part, but it's so much wasted potential there. That money would be better spent elsewhere on your camera, which we're definitely gonna talk about. I personally did want to go with a full frame camera when I started out, but after looking through it and realizing I'm coming from a smartphone sensor, which, side note, they're only 17 millimeters, it's gonna be a big upgrade either way it goes. Now with full frame cameras pretty much explained, basically, we can move on to its smaller counterpart, the crop sensor. Now the first thing that comes to mind when a lot of folks compare and contrast the full frame sensor to crop sensor is, what am I losing out on? Why wouldn't I just spend the extra money on a full frame camera when I'm gonna lose stuff going to a crop sensor? And this is me speaking from experience. You're not gonna miss out on much, especially if you're just starting out in photography. I ended up settling on the Sony a6100. Of course, if you watched my last video, you know I'm using that right now. And even so, being a crop sensor, the photos that I capture, which you'll probably see some flashing up on screen right now, were all captured and look just as great if I took it on a full frame camera as well. With crop sensor cameras, they can go by other names. You can usually see them as APS-C cameras or micro four thirds. And they all end up meaning the same thing, is that they don't fully go to the 35 millimeter that a full frame does. They're essentially cropped in, so they punch in a little bit more when you're actually taking that photo. One major difference going from a full frame camera down to a crop sensor is that you end up getting a much smaller footprint of a camera than you would with a full frame. And going that route, of course, since you're not buying as much camera, you end up saving a lot of money on the front end going with a crop sensor. Best part about that, the money you save not buying a full frame camera can go into other things like better lenses, more camera accessories, and stuff to elevate your photography as well. Even though a crop sensor sounds like you may be missing out by not going with its full frame brethren, the crop sensor gives you a lot of benefits that you may not get in its full frame cousins. Most, if not all, crop sensor cameras are what they call mirrorless cameras. They effectively cut out one of the biggest components of the full frame cameras, one of the mirrors inside of the camera body that actually bounces light to capture said photos, which gives you a much smaller footprint. A crop sensor camera usually lacks the mirror and prism that its full frame brethren use to both capture and preview images through its viewfinder. Mirrorless cameras use a back LCD or EVF, also known as an electronic viewfinder, to preview the image, not needing the prism and mirrors of its full frame brethren. Biggest benefit there, being a beginner, you can actually get used to seeing what changes can be made with all of the settings and dials on your camera without having to waste time of taking your photos off the camera, putting them on your laptop, only to see that this one's too bright, this one's too dark, or completely overexposed. Now, my favorite benefit of having a crop sensor camera, of course, the small size is always nice, but it's a lot lighter than its full frame brethren as well, which makes it a lot easier when you have to get into a little weird spot to get those perfect shots. Personally, I recommend going with a crop sensor when you're just starting out because there's no reason to spend all the extra money on something that's just going to confuse you in the beginning. Starting out with a crop sensor camera ends up saving you money in the long run, and it gives you time to learn the key parts of photography, mainly the compositions of your shots, lighting techniques, and even just the settings on your camera just to get you started. So when I was starting out, there were a couple of cameras that caught my eye, but I ultimately ended up with the Sony. But just to give you something to look into, the first camera that caught my eye was actually the Fujifilm X-T100. It shoots at 24 megapixels. It also records 4K video, only at 15 frames per second, but not a big deal. You do get access to Fujifilm's film simulation modes. It's essentially a way to emulate the old look of Fujifilm's previous cameras, which is really cool. I also checked out the Canon EOS M50. It's also a 24 megapixel camera. It records video at 4K at 25 frames per second, so a little faster than the Fujifilm camera. And the kit lens it comes with covers a wide range, giving you zoom from 15 to 45 millimeters at f3.5. As you know, I ended up going with the Sony a6300, honestly for two big reasons. One, the autofocus is fantastic on it, and I honestly just like how it looks, super sleek. The key takeaway from all this for you is to just honestly pick one. When it boils down to the camera body, it's really what you want as far as style and feature set as opposed to how great the photos are going to come out. Like they say, it's not about the size of your camera, it's how you use it.
Yeah, baby!
Now that we've had a chance to talk about camera bodies, moving on to one of the most important features of any camera, the lens. Once you've made a decision on which camera you want to go for, the next thing you want to do is look at the lens selection. This is the bigger part of your photography game. Your camera lenses decide just how well your camera gets to see the world, and you have tons of choices. If you're getting your camera brand new straight from the manufacturer, it's going to come in the box with something called a kit lens. Now your kit lens is going to be a great place to start, and you can hang out there for as long as you like, but adding different lenses to your kit gives you a whole new way to look at the exact same scene in a different light. There's four main lenses that you're going to run into in your experiences. You got your standard lens, your wide lens, your telephoto lens, and your macro lens. And each one of them is going to have a different take on what they can see based on their focal length. The focal length is that little mm number that you see alongside your camera lenses. It's telling you the distance between the sensor and the point of convergence inside the lens. Basically, it's where what your camera is seeing meets the actual sensor in your camera. With each different type of lens, you actually get a different take on the exact same scene. A standard lens is going to give you pretty close to what you're normally used to seeing every day, between 35 and 85 millimeters. A wide angle lens is going to give you a much wider field of view, almost like sharpening your peripheral vision. Usually those lenses are around 25 to 35 millimeters. Your telephoto lenses are basically your zoom and enhance lens. They can go from 85 millimeters all the way out to 300 millimeters plus. Basically, it's like Daredevil's enhanced senses, minus the fact that Daredevil's blind. Yeah, never mind. That's a bad example. Finally, you have macro lenses. These lenses usually have the same focal lengths as the standard ones, but they offer magnification to where you can get really close to small subjects like bugs, leaves, or even getting some excruciating details in things like wood, stone, granite for some really interesting photos. They're designed for super close-up shots so you can get really great detail in the most minute things. Now with all these different lens types, this is how you get the most out of any camera that you grab. The glass that you add to any camera body is going to add a world of difference between if you grab something that costs $5,000 or $6,000 but then throw a $100 lens on it. Another thing to note about lenses is besides the camera bodies, this is the most expensive part of DSLR photography. Now in my kit, I actually have 3 lenses that I go with. 2 of them I bought used, 1 I bought brand new, but either way it goes, it was still a pretty penny. At the end of the day, that last lens that I bought that was brand new, i.e. the one I'm using right now, was totally worth it to make sure you get those tack sharp images. Now, we've picked out our camera, grabbed a couple of lenses besides the kit lens that came with it. Now we're on to the craziest part of photography, the accessories. Camera bags, off-camera flash, ND filters, SD card holders, external hard drives, monopods, tripods, gorilla pods. Oh my God. There is absolutely no end to the amount of accessories that you can grab with any DSLR camera. But the thing is, it really depends on if you need it or not. No reason to grab accessories just because they're there. Out of all the stuff that you can grab, here's a few recommendations from me personally. A decent camera bag. The one I have here is actually a Tamron bag. Got it on Amazon, about 70 bucks. But the reasons I chose it, first off, it's super comfortable. Actually has some padding under the straps. Quick access. You never know when a quick photo op can happen, so in and out, just like that. And third, all the big zippers are actually on my back, so it keeps everything I have in there secure. A camera strap. I didn't originally have one of these when I first started out, and this is only part of it, the other half's on the camera. But it really comes in handy when you're out taking shots and you want to take a quick break to maybe scat out a scene or just need a break from holding your camera. Another one, SD card holder, and of course, some very fast SD cards. If you're going to be doing a lot of 4K video or a lot of burst mode shooting, going with the higher class will be able to make sure you can get back to shooting as opposed to waiting for your camera to write everything to the memory card. And of course, a tripod. This is actually my mini tripod. I keep this with me in my bag just for emergencies. My big one I usually pack up with me is doing work right now, of course. But when it comes to stability, when you're doing long exposure photography, a tripod is pretty much going to be the only way to get it done. Or if you need some stability when you're taking headshots as well. Okay, now I know I threw a ton of information at you in this video. Of course, thanks for sticking with me so long. But here's a quick recap just to run through it all, give you the Cliff Notes version of this video. When it comes to your camera, definitely go ahead and save the money and grab yourself a crop sensor lens. As you've seen, my Sony a6300 does the job perfectly fine. Despite everything else and all the other benefits, still, get yourself a crop sensor camera. Again, those 2 big reasons, you're gonna save a lot more money on the front end so you can spend it on the more crucial things on the back end, and you're still gonna get fantastic shots no matter what. When it comes to the lenses in your kit, of course, you wanna take the time out and think about what you're gonna be shooting. So if you're gonna be doing just a little bit of everything, go ahead and get yourself a standard lens with a little bit of zoom. If you know you're gonna be doing animal photography or need to have some distance between you and your subject, go ahead and look at getting a telephoto lens. If you're gonna be doing a lot of small detailed images, go ahead and grab that macro lens as well, just to have all the items in your kit ready to go no matter what you need to shoot. About all the extras that we just talked about moments ago, I always tell folks not to worry too much about all the extras. When it comes down to it, get what you need to get all your photos first and then fill your kit in later. All the crazy extras and gadgets that you see plastered all over Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, that will come. But there's no need to stress over not having a certain item right now, especially when you're starting out. I can say I did want them to, but after seeing the price tag on half of them, yeah, after that, never mind. All right, my fellow photographers, that was my not so short video on how to get started in photography. First off, I want to say thanks for sticking with me through this long-winded video, but I'm glad you stuck with me and hopefully you found some useful information here. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button before you take off. I'll make sure and put a few extra links down there in the description as well for all the other things that I use that's in my photography kit that I can get a chance to put in here for you. So thanks again guys for hanging out with me here at Taylor Photography, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.